Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here for this IANA webinar, a conversation with Keith Reardon. I'm Hal Pollard. I'm the Director of Education and Committees at IANA. We've got a great opportunity to sit down and chat with the Senior Vice President of Consumer Products at CN. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our Platinum Plus sponsors for helping us out and bringing this to you today. It's a great group of industry partners that I'm sure you're all aware of, but we owe them a debt of gratitude, because they make this and a lot of other things at IANA possible. So very much a deep thank you to our Platinum Plus sponsor. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. We're really lucky to have Keith Reardon. He's the Senior Vice President of Consumer Products and Supply Chain at Canadian National, CN, Big Red. They got a number of names, but we're really pleased to have him here today. Just to start off, I'd like just to have you introduce yourself a little bit, talk a little bit about your journey to where you are now and kind of what you're up to now before we get
Sure.
Stuff.
Well, start off. Thanks, Hal, for the opportunity to talk to you today. As we've been preparing for our sessions, it's been very, very good conversations. I'm a former Baltimore boy, so we had a little bit of baseball talk there this morning about the Orioles. But yeah, I'm a second generation railroader. My father worked at CSX for 37 years. I always thought that I would not get into the railroad business. Started off wanting to be a marine biologist, but soon pivoted over to business. So I've been at CN since 1998, and I took a little 2-year break in between there for a while. But so I owe everything in my adult life, basically, to two railroads, CSX and CN, because they were footing the bill pretty much the whole way. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Hal.
That's great. Well, it's great, and it's not uncommon. You definitely have a lot of folks that they get railroading in the blood, and it sort of is a natural thing. It comes to get you, even if you were planning on being a marine biologist, and pulls you back in. It says a lot about the career and what it does for you. Speaking of which, when you reflect back on the pivotal moments in the industry throughout your career, can you give us a couple of examples of important moments that you've experienced and learned from?
Sure. I guess it all depends on what lens you look at these things through. For myself, I just kind of gave you a little bit of my background there. First thing I think of is when CN went from being a Crown Corporation to being listed on the New York Stock Exchange and the Toronto Stock Exchange. So public company, and that was 1995. Then immediately after that, I think of the IC merger with CN and what that changed the landscape of the industry. I also think about the ocean carriers and their mergers and acquisitions, and then ultimately the new round of alliances that have occurred. I think about the Hanjin bankruptcy. I think about the digital transformation that's ongoing in the industry. But when I think of things that really changed my view on stuff, I mean, I could really easily go back to all of them, but the Hanjin bankruptcy was one that really changed a lot for us here at CN. We had just attracted them and their alliance to come over Prince Rupert. And when their vessels were being arrested all around the globe, basically there was just thousands and thousands of containers of product that were in those, they were on those ships and in those containers that people weren't going to get. There were hundreds and hundreds of BCOs that were being affected on the west coast of Canada. And while others were talking about charging increased storage fees and holding containers until lawyers and everything got involved, we went right to Hanjin and we went right to the BCOs and we said, hey, you know what? We'd like to help the situation. So we cut deals directly with Hanjin and the BCOs, and we started moving freight within 36 hours of the arrested vessels there. And what that did for us is it created a reputation for solving problems and for cutting through red tape and kind of just trying to do business. And the relationships that we established with those hundreds of BCOs through that process is stuck today, and it's one of the key platforms that we use to grow our business. And the people that were at Hanjin that we worked through that process, they all went to other carriers, or a lot of them are at SM lines, and they're our friends and colleagues today because of the tack that we took at that point in time. So taking all of those things I listed before, there's positives and negatives, and just being agile enough and being thoughtful enough and taking a swing at the ball sometimes that you don't know, everybody's going one way and you go the other. And that's kind of what we did.
Yeah, no, that's a great story. The fact that you guys stepped up and solved problems where you could have very easily said, no, we're just going to get ours, and we're not moving this stuff, and we're going to park it. And that didn't help anybody. Pivoting from that, what do you think are some of the most critical things that the industry needs to address in the next 5 to 10 years?
High on that list is safety and sustainability. Many of us are lucky enough to be part of supply chains, have a network that we go through communities, and so we have to maintain our social license by staying safe and also looking out for the environment and all of the things that go with sustainability. So that's important. I think you're going to see that visibility of the supply chain is going to be very, very important. It's something that we're focusing on very intently with a lot of innovation and technology, customer-facing visibility tools that, to be quite frank, we didn't focus on for years through some of our other evolutions and journeys. And we have been over the last several years. And the one big one that we have, and we call it the supply chain integration and orchestration. And that's basically tying all the parties in the supply chain together. You've seen a lot of forms of that in other industries, and we're going to do that. And it's when we're not picking and choosing winners as to who gets integrated with. We're going to integrate with everybody. Service, ultimately service. Customers, they want to have reliable, consistent, and resilient service. And that's something that has to be done over the next 5 to 10 years. We got to get better at it from a railroad standpoint so that we can participate in more of the truck movements that are out there today. That's our growth engine, is conversion of that, because the environment needs it too. We're much more sustainable to put on rail. But the biggest thing is the physical infrastructure. I mean, our ports, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in the U.S. or Mexico, we have to bolster our port capabilities and capacities. The inland terminals, our rail lines, we've got to be able to handle more product. The warehouses, distribution centers, the fulfillment centers, and micro fulfillment centers, we got to make sure that they have enough capacity in order to grow. I mean, bottom line is there's a lot of growth. We've seen it through the pandemic, and it has to be people too. There's not enough people getting into our industry. And it's one of the things that I try and do. Spend a lot of time with universities and colleges, and we've got to entice people to come into our industry from a younger person standpoint. First mile, last mile. We've got to figure out what we're going to do first mile, last mile, whether it's chassis, whether it's the type of equipment we're doing the first mile, last mile with. Are we going to get into the electric trucks? We're a big believer in the electric trucks. We partnered with Lion Electric. We're purchasing first mile, last mile trucks, as well as trucks to be used inside the terminals. So I think all of those things, Hal, are going to be important over the next 5 to 10 years to be successful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you've hit on a lot of key topics that are, I think, critical for the industry to really take advantage of what opportunity is there. And some of it's, as you mentioned, it's not really opportunity. It's part of the social contract that the industry has with where we are and where we operate. Is we've got to be good stewards of our investment dollars, but also of our shared environment. So yeah, it's really good to hear. Focusing in from that on to CN in particular, what is your vision for CN looking like in, say, 10 years? What kind of infrastructure, technology, and equipment investments and those kinds of things will it take for you guys to remain competitive and grow?
So our future vision is based on where we've been and where we are today. Mm-hmm. So our foundation of the precision scheduled railroading that got us to the point that we were at 10, 15 years ago, and then evolving into a supply chain mindset that allowed us to start thinking about growth and start thinking about the interconnectivity amongst all the people in the supply chain, whether it's a port operator, the drayage carriers, ourselves, our customers, customers. And we've gotten to that point today where maybe in the past technology wasn't there enough to do some of the things that we want to do now, but it is. There's innovation, there's technology that allows us to go back to my other point, harden our network, make it safer. So when we go through these communities, that we're doing so in a much better fashion than maybe we did 5, 10 years ago. A lot more confidence to go through with different products. And those are technology innovations that have allowed us to focus on being better, being more safe over the next 5 to 10 years. Two of the things that we've done is autonomous track inspection cars. We have 10 box cars that are just full of telemetry and inspection devices, and they go along in regular merchandise service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're inspecting track. And they're doing so in a much more efficient and effective manner than our track inspectors ever could, because the human eye just can't pick up things that these devices are doing. So they're able to go over more territory and get a more broad and a deeper appreciation of what needs to be done to the track, therefore freeing up a lot of the maintenance folks to, instead of inspecting track, they're actually fixing more track. Our derailments are improving, our FRA accidents are improving. The nature of the health of our network is improving. And we're doing the same thing on rolling stock, our rail cars. We have the inspection portals, out in Manitoba and here in Toronto. We'll be putting more of those out as we continue to work with the regulators to show them how effective this is. But it's basically at track speed, which means 45 miles an hour. These units are inspecting with thousands of photographs the health of the car, and they can see defects again that the human eye can't see when our carmen are walking up and down the track, taking quite a while to inspect the track in order to do a good job. These things are doing that much more efficiently and effectively, and finding more defects. So where you start off, if you go by one of these portals and they give you 5 or 10 algorithms to start off with. And so you'll catch certain things, but we've been investigating and working with a lot of really bright minds in IT and rail car repair companies. And so we are now working on hundreds of these algorithms to be able to we want to catch every defect. And when we start to do those types of things, we take a lot of inconsistencies out of operating the railroad. We're going to be safer. We are safer today because of what we put out there. And as we have more coverage across the network, we're just going to get better and better. So technology is really going to be our key over the next 5 to 10 years. So we're going from PSR to DSR, digital scheduled railroading.
Interesting. That's a great way to kind of fold that in. I knew that you guys were sort of pushing the envelope in certain ways in terms of technology, but that's really fascinating how you're rolling that into, like, you don't get much more critical about operations than track and rolling stock inspection. And it sounds like you're having great success. I mean, that's
tremendous success. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we've done, Hal, is in order to go from concept to we call it concept to cash. We were studying things years ago, and it would take 3, 4, 5 years to study something. And JJ, under JJ's leadership, he said, "Come on, folks, let's start to put some stuff in the field, and let's get some value out of it. Number one, and let's harden it, let's test it right in the field." So we've been doing that over the last 2 years, and we've made a lot more progress by doing it that way than having everything in the lab out there. So, I think we've been criticized sometimes on being the cutting edge of some of this stuff, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, Absolutely. And if you can kind of bend that curve to get to the cash component, assuming that demand for intermodal will continue to rise, we certainly think it will.
That's a good assumption, I think.
Yeah. What are you folks doing at CN to create more capacity in the network and in the terminals, and kind of carrying on from that? What does CN offer that can be considered unique to the industry for the wholesaler and the third-party shipper?
So, Hal, on that, investment is what you need in order to create capacity. And, we've been probably one of the higher investing railroads. About 20% of our revenues get put back into the physical plant, and now more so to the digital plant, I guess. And so that's network, that's track. Not only are we improving the safety, but we're also expanding our capacity on track. It's inside of our terminals, the intermodal terminals. We're expanding the footprint. We're adding new intermodal terminals. We have a new one in New Richmond, not too far outside of Minneapolis. It's a little twist that we're trying. We're doing automotive and intermodal in the same terminal. We've expanded our Chicago facility. We created a Joliet facility. We always have options to do more in Chicago with Harvey. We can talk about that maybe a little bit later. But we have our Milton facility that we hope to put a shovel in the ground later this year. But what we also have done is, because of the technology and the innovations that have occurred, we've taken the existing footprints that we have at a lot of our facilities, and we've game planned, okay, how can we be more efficient in the terminal? How can we create traffic inside the terminal to be more efficient? So the first place we started, because it's our biggest terminal, is here in Brampton. We do well over 1 million containers a year through this terminal. And for the footprint that we have, it's probably one of the more efficient terminals in North America, if not the most. So here in Brampton, we've created a project that we call Smart Terminals. So we put telemetry on all of the rolling stock of equipment that we have here. So our cranes, we call them shunt trucks, things that are moving chassis around. By the way, all of our terminals are, for the most part, are grounded terminals, which is a little different than what you see in some of the U.S. terminals as well. So in this particular terminal, because we've invested the time and effort to look forward towards smart terminals, we needed to have every piece of equipment identified and tracked. And just by doing that, we've improved the efficiency at this terminal in the mid-single digits, just by knowing where everything is on a real-time basis. It's crazy. We also improved the Wi-Fi throughout the whole terminal. There are no dead zones. Before, we had a couple of dead zones. That increased another couple of points. So what we're doing is finding where we can invest dollars in technology, innovation, also in the physical plant, to extract more value out of it and to improve the capabilities and the capacities at these terminals. We want to grow. We're a growth company, and so we have to figure out how to do that in a low cost manner. And so we're doing that. We're not where we want to be yet, but we've got some good lines of sight to where we're going to be. And with regard to smart terminals, it's the leading up to semi-automated terminals down the road.
That's great. And there's a lot there, and a lot that we can learn collectively from the experience in the marine side. Those port terminals obviously have some restraints on how much they can make use of automation, but that really doesn't play on the inland side. So I think that's an interesting thing that I think that's probably an ongoing conversation. One of the things that's been interesting to me is sort of the growth of cold chain and the kind of conversations around that. And typically, over the road trucking, those 53-foot reefers sort of seem to be the dominant mode for cold chain, but things seem to be kind of turning the tide for intermodal and cold chain for the the reliability and the safety in a lot of those aspects. From your perspective, how do you see CN sort of playing in cold chain space over the next 5 years or so?
So we were a big player in the intermodal reefer game back prior in the mid 2000s. Yeah. And we didn't do it as well as we needed to do it. And at the time, Hunter basically said, okay, sell those reefers, get rid of them. We were having too many claims. We were having too many issues. The way that we were operating, they were too costly to do. So we sold them. We sold them to a partner. We sold them to Transex. And so we got out of the door-to-door business, but we kept in contact with them and other of our wholesale partners. We thought it was a good business to be in. And so in 2013, we decided to get back into the business. And we started investing in people. We started investing in processes way before we started investing into the physical assets, because we wanted to make sure this time we knew what we were doing and we were going to be successful at it, and that we were going to be able to attract that business off the road onto rail. So in 2013, we started to add containers, also heaters, because in Canada it's not just a one-way temperature game. You gotta keep things at proper ambient temperature in the winter as well. So we wanted to get back in that game, and I actually came in the intermodal around 2012, and it's one of my pet projects. I love the coal supply chain game, and it's not just domestic. We got back into it in a big way on the overseas business. We run what we call gen sets, and those gen sets power up to 17 of our customers' overseas reefer containers through one gen set, one 40-foot container that has the power in it. And we've been developing our proprietary software that operates that. It monitors its own physical health, and if the customer's reefers are so capable, we can monitor their reefers through our umbilical cords that go throughout the reefer build. So both from a domestic standpoint and an overseas standpoint, we have been well positioned to grow over the next 5 to 10 years. And I got to tell you, it was proof. It proved us right during the pandemic. We have grown that business quite well. It also helps that we had great timing with our acquisitions of Transex and H&R roughly 2 years ago. So you layer on all of that, and then with the way that people want to eat better, you've got all the different types of processed foods that need refrigeration that are oncoming. All of our families are the ones. I hope everybody's family is. Mine is lucky enough to eat some really good foods, and all those need to be taken care of. The food safety requirements these days are much bigger and better than they were. So we feel very, very well positioned for the future growth of the cold supply chain industry. And it's one of the reasons why we feel so strongly about our partnership with the KCS and our ability to be a good steward in the acquisition of it, because there is so much cold supply chain that's going up the heart of the U.S. into Canada and back down into Mexico. We feel we've got a really good game plan for that. And also our wholesale partners that are in the refrigerated game, because we're in the refrigerated game, they know that we understand the business, and we operate their boxes on our trains just like we operate our boxes on the trains. So again, we're a great custodian for our wholesalers, because we're in the door-to-door business, whether it's refrigerated or non-refrigerated. So we understand what their needs are, and we operate in lockstep with them.
Yeah, that was a piece that I was interested in digging into a little bit. Is I know that you guys have not entirely unique, but a robust retail operation. And one of the things that I'm interested in is, what has that taught you about servicing customers, either your customers or your partners' customers?
Well, we understand, if it's in the refrigerated or the heated side of the business, we understand about shelf life. And that's a very important thing when you're talking about the cold supply chain. When you're talking about dealing with the retailers, we understand about inventory carrying costs. And we understand that dwell time at the ports or dwell time through the terminals costs them additional money because it's on their books until it gets sold, right? So if you can take a couple of days out of the supply chain, you can improve your working capital, reduce your inventory carrying costs. So because we deal directly with the BCOs on that, when we deal with our wholesale partners or the IMCs, then we're able to act accordingly for them, and it gives us maybe a little bit of a leg up than others that don't. Right? It's a great selling point for us, and our wholesalers also they need to get their equipment back. Your empty that you have today is your next load, and we operate our railroad the exact same way. I want my assets to turn. And we try and do the exact same thing for the wholesalers, the IMC partners. We're a participant in the EMP program, so I want to get those EMPs back to the next load just as much as anybody else does. So I think our engagement in that door-to-door business, the fact that we have our own CNTL, which is our door-to-door truck fleet that's operated by our owner-operators. We also know that the challenges of getting through a terminal, what they are, and what wait time is, and how do we minimize that? How do we create an experience for the driver that he wants to come into the terminals? And it's no secret. We've had our issues in Chicago at our Harvey terminal, but I believe they're rectified now. We've made a lot of investments. We've done some work on the technology front, and we've also made a change in our terminal operator in Harvey. See, in Canada, we operate our own terminals, and in the States, we have third parties that operate them, as you know. So yeah, I think we're well suited for being the intermodal railroad that has a door-to-door product, but also the wholesale product, and it actually allows us to create a bigger pie for both of us when we have that capability.
That's the gem right there, is that notion of it's a supply chain, and all the players have a role in it, and there's an element of sort of paying it forward, or at least paying it sideways, right? If you're a good partner, then everybody benefits from that. It's not always the next guy's problem, right? It's frequently it's easier to resolve that problem and give everybody a win than just moving a problem to the side.
Yeah, my a famous saying that it's not famous, but a saying that I say all the time with my partners, whether they're the port partners, the trucking partners, or the wholesale asset owners, is that let's operate as if we're one company. Let's take out the waste, and then we'll figure out the budgets later. Because if we all come to the table worried about our own budget, we will never optimize the supply chain. So we try and game plan things as if we're one company, and then put the solutions together, take the waste out of the system, and that's really how we try and operate.
That's great to hear, and I think that's from your lips to others' ears, hopefully. So I think it's a way for everybody to win. There's, as we've seen repeatedly, like we don't need to be reminded of it, but as we've seen repeatedly, there is more than enough business for everybody to work 48 hours in one day. In terms of CN and where you're all going, you've been growing over the last 10 years, at a kind of a breakneck pace. You mentioned a lot of your growth, your acquisitions, the expansion of the infrastructure. One of my pet favorite things is the double tracking and what that does for safety and efficiency. And so I know that you've been working a lot on that sort of behind the scenes. In terms of what's next for, say, the next 10 years, what's up for you guys on keeping pace for that growth and that long-term plan for CN?
Sure. So, as I said before, in order for us to game plan on where we want to go, we've got to kind of take a look at where we've been and what's been making us successful, because we really don't want to change the model too much unless when we talk to our customers, they tell us we need to change the model. And one of the things that we've been able to do is, in working with our customers and taking this great network that we have, this coast to coast to coast network, and opening it up for them so that we can take them to new markets. And, we've been doing that not only through places like Prince Rupert, but also Vancouver, Halifax. We have some things on the drawing board for Quebec. We've done a really good job with the ports in New Orleans and Mobile to expand our capabilities and our capacities, and we're generating significant growth over those two gateways as well. I think we're pretty well set up, and it's one of the reasons that we've been looking at the Mexico market for a long time, whether it was because of the USMCA or just our past interactions with the KCS. And when they made it known that they were available for sale, we came into the mix. And I'll say this, I said it earlier, we do believe that we are the best partner for them. We're a great opportunity for us to expand our coverage for our customers, take them on the next show on the road. We've been expanding the markets for them, and this is just one more way that we can do that for our existing customer base, and also the new customers that we coming into know on the KCS. So I think it's just the next iteration of the plan that we've been working, to be honest with you, Hal.
That makes sense. You did mention before, in terms of your operations, you said that most of your terminals are grounded. Was that a difficult transition for you to move to a kind of a grounded model? And is that the model for the entire road, or is it just sort of, do you have it for specific terminals or specific cases?
It's one that we try and apply everywhere. We may have a section of a terminal, or a couple sections of a couple terminals that still we may use some wheeled storage on, just for maybe it's a particular customer or a particular product that we have. But for the most part, yeah, we have the grounded. And remember now that we also have our own chassis fleet in Canada. We have that fleet for our wholesalers, for our BCOs, our door-to-door product, and then some of our ocean customers as well. And it's a little bit different than how things are applied in the States. But I will tell you that several years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we got into some challenges with chassis in certain markets. And so we went and purchased some chassis. We needed some resiliency. And I think that's what's key in all the supply chains is, when you hear people say, I wasn't ready for the 26% bump in volume. Well, nobody is. Nobody is. I'm not ready for that. But we've got to somehow create some resiliency that we can tap into when we need it. And, that's why our wholesale partners and our relationship is so good, because there are times when I give them some of my assets, and there are times when they give us some of their assets. And our ocean line customers are one of those. We have an interesting program that we call DRP. It's Domestic Repositioning Program. So when our ocean carriers are wanting to reposition one of their boxes back to the coast, we oftentimes work with them, and we take that box and we use it in domestic service. And because we use it in domestic service, it reduces their round trip economics significantly. But it also, because we're a grounded operation, we can do those types of things. So the grounded operations give us a flexibility with all of the different products and services that we have here at CN. And we are much more complicated than a lot of the other railroads with regard to our products and services. It's harder to manage. We don't have a domestic terminal and an overseas terminal. We have terminals. Mm-hmm. And because of that, it is much more complicated to run, but we're also able to do quite a few different things because of it.
Now that makes a lot of sense. Shifting gears a little bit, you've had some really great insights about the Hanjin collapse and the kind of reverberations that sent through the industry and the learning opportunity that it was for everybody. When you look back, can you pinpoint any other career changing moments or events? And how do you see that affected your career trajectory?
Well, as someone who started off wanting to be a marine biologist and quickly saw that in my sophomore year of studies, my friends that were marine biologists were getting out of school and not having a job. So I had to quickly pivot to something that would pay the bills. So I got into business, but I was actually out selling steel abrasives in the shipbuilding and railcar blasting or railcar building and in the foundry business. And I was doing really well. And I was a young guy and making good money. And my boss at the time, who used to be a railroader actually at one of the Eastern railroads, he purchased this company. He said, I need you to come into town. So I went back into town and he said, hey, he says, I want you to stop working here. And I said, am I not doing a good job? I mean, I was distraught. I didn't know. He goes, no. He says, I want you to go to school and get your MBA. He says, I want you to take 2 years. He says, I want you to work part-time for me so you can continue funding your education, but I want you to get an MBA and I want you to get it in the logistics business. So I went to the University of North Florida. I got my MBA in transportation logistics from some of the really great minds that were there and also at Tennessee at the time. And that was a big wow for me because up till then, I didn't want to be in the rail industry, but I did kind of like being in the transportation or seeing how transportation worked. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, once I got through my MBA and I saw how things started to work, and then it was almost like the Matrix moment. I could see how things were connected. And so for me, it was a wow moment, and it gave me a purpose. It gave me something to aspire to be. And I looked at some of the greats in the industry, and luckily I got to work with a lot of the greats in the industry, some of that are still in working today. And so that was my wow moment, that I went from having a job to having a purpose.
That's a great way to say it. Props to UNF for doing a great job. One of our scholarship schools amongst several. And, shameless plug for our scholarship program. Our president and CEO, Joni Casey, has really lovingly built an incredible program that I'm particularly really proud of for that very reason. That is, it takes folks that have an interest and turns it into a calling. And I think that's one of the really amazing things about this industry in general, is it's got so much depth and character. And, if you are a people person, if you're a finance person, if you're a technology person, it's all here. It's one of the really, if you're an engineer, electrical, structural, civil, you name it, there's just a plethora of opportunities. So thanks for sharing that. That's a great one. What do you see as one of the most challenging parts of learning the industry, and how would you suggest folks go about kind of getting smart, getting up to speed?
So while I was in the rail industry at CN, I was more on the carload side and the transload side. So building transfer terminals, steel, lumber, petrochemicals, that type of thing. And so I wasn't on the intermodal side as much. And when I started, but I was involved in the automotive business. And I got a chance to travel with JJ overseas and see the different things that were going on that I had never been involved with before. So different cultures, different ways of doing business, and seeing the big ports when we would go overseas. And then JJ gave me the opportunity to be in the intermodal business. And what I found very quickly was, because I moved from carload over to intermodal, I had a lot to learn. It was very complicated. There were so many more details that I needed to know that I didn't know. And so I just jumped in full bore and started meeting with customers after customer after customer, meeting with our supply chain partners after supply chain partners, and not just here in North America, but overseas. I wouldn't see my family for a month at a time. We'd be traveling overseas. And that's how I got to know the details. And, I've had people my whole life tell me, hey, you're too in the weeds. You got to think bigger picture. But knowing the details is how you make the money. And that's how you shore up any of the problems that you might have in your supply chain. And that's how you create solution, is knowing what the details are. So I think you got to spend time with your customers. You got to understand their business, what products and services they need, what their products and services are, and how you can help them get it to market. All of those things, Hal, are the details really matter. And so I focused in on that. When I came over to Intermodal right away, I realized that, JJ's a detail guy, and I know how much he's loved in the intermodal space. So I decided that it was my way to grow was to understand the details.
That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it's good for folks to hear. Intermodal is a little bit more complicated, but in part because it's a little bit more flexible, and you've got a lot of opportunities, and it's great to hear that core of like, well, how do I learn this? I go talk to the customers that have the need, and then that helped you figure out how to solve that problem for them.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts. If you don't know how they're all integrated and how they all work together, it makes it very, very complicated, and it'll make it frustrating for you as a service provider, but also frustrating for the customer. For
sure, yeah. Well, as folks can see from your background, you guys actually are working there. So it's a good reminder of it's all about the moving parts. We've got time for one more of my questions before we open it up to some of the audience questions. And this one is in this day and age, you can't have a question or a conversation that doesn't involve the pandemic in some way, shape, or form. So it's kind of at a high end. How did the pandemic affect CN's intermodal business?
So first off, the pandemic was a stress test on our people, our facilities, and our processes, because we had to layer on additional processes to what we do in our very day-to-day or our everyday hectic day. And I was so proud of the people, because they came to work each and every day. They fulfilled their duties, and they actually exceeded the expectations of us and our customers. So that's first. Next is we created a lot of processes around it to be even safer. And some of those processes are going to stick. A lot of, we got rid of paper. And that has improved our efficiencies. It's improved our costs. We avoided a lot of touch points with people that we didn't need. We were much more efficient in our tool chest talks, our pre-shift talks. We actually found ways to get in and out of our assets, our rolling stock, without having to clean them, as well as we did at the very beginning of the pandemic. Everybody was so hypersensitive to wiping down all surfaces, right? So we figured out ways that, although we were staying safe, we didn't have to do it that way. We were cleaning things in a different manner. So it's all about evolving and creating new solutions, which the team is very, very good at. We've been very resilient at CN. We've had our share of things happen over the last several years with our blockades and with just various things that have occurred. And so our folks know how to adapt. They're very agile. And the pandemic just gave us an opportunity to become even more agile than we were previously.
That makes a lot of sense. And certainly, a lot of those efficiencies that you worked hard to figure out, I can see how they are probably going to, just kind of continue on. As an example, if a driver doesn't have to get out of his power unit, why make them? With that, we've got a little bit of time left. We're going to pivot over and do some Q&A from the audience. One of the questions is about chassis forecasting. And do you have any suggestions for ways in which the industry might be able to work together to improve, chassis forecasting?
Yeah. So one thing that we always focus in on is uptime. So if you have a fleet, if you can keep it working, then you, by mathematics, have more of a fleet. Yeah. So I think that's key. And I think that's key for everybody in the supply chain. If you're a drayman, or if you're a railroad, or if you're an ocean carrier, or anybody who is using an asset and there's something wrong with the asset, don't stick it in the corner field and then it sits there for a long time. We have that happen to us with our own chassis fleet. And if something's wrong with it, we want people to let us know, notify us right up front, so we can take it right over to the hotline, get it fixed so it can be within 20 or 30 minutes actually being used, not shoved over in the corner to hide it because you actually damaged it, right? So that's one thing. The other is, as you can get your everybody's cutting deals, creating contracts with their customers, as much as you can from a forecasting standpoint, get it to your chassis provider. I mean, give them as much information as you can for the longer term, 1 year, because we do our planning 1 year, 3 year, right? And that's how we have enough stuff to do our business. If you can't give that information to the people who are supplying the chassis, then there potentially will be some problems there. Now, nobody's going to be able to handle a 26% increase in business and have it run smoothly. But if there are those 5 to 10% upticks, maybe we can handle them more often, more efficiently by giving a little bit better forecasting. Hey, internally, if we don't forecast well, I can't say anything to anybody about our operations. I got to give them. I got to be able to send them off to a fight with both hands in front of them, not one hand tied behind their back. And that's what we do when we don't forecast well, whether it's chassis or containers or anything else.
That makes a lot of sense. Here's a quick question around the work that you've done applying technology in your portals, and it's a creative question. Do you foresee any inspection as service, so that you can kind of parlay that technology and the experience you've got at doing that kind of rolling inspection and flip that over so other folks could benefit from that? So whether it's at least in the US, the chassis providers, or perhaps the motor carrier, the box owner, that kind of thing?
That is definitely one of our business models moving forward. It kind of ties into what we just talked about, uptime of equipment. If I can, that's what we're seeing, whether it's our track or our rail cars. If we can predict, or if we can see before it actually gets to the mechanic, then they know, or the trackman, then they know what's wrong with the particular piece of equipment. They can have the parts ready. They can, there's no putting it over there waiting for the parts to come. You'll know as it's being inspected. So yes, that is a service that we are looking. We're not going to be able to do it this year, but we do think that within the next 12 to 16 months, that could be a service that we could be providing to the equipment owners, whether it's the asset based IMCs, or the ocean carriers, or the chassis pool providers.
Oh, that's great. That's a really creative solution that I think a lot of folks will be really interested to learn more about. Well, listen, I wish we could keep going because we've got a ton of questions, but I know that we've got a hard stop. First and foremost, Keith, thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's always a treat to have you with us, and I was learning a heck of a lot and have a great time. So I appreciate you making the time. For all the attendees, thank you for joining us. Another shout out to our Platinum Plus sponsors who help make this available to everybody. They really go the extra mile for the industry, and we very much appreciate it. And with that, head on over to intermodal.org for more information about the Intermodal Adapts program, all of our webinars throughout the year. You can also send us an email at info@intermodal.org, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. One last thing, keep in mind, Intermodal Expo is on for September 12th through the 14th in Long Beach, California. You can head on over to intermodalexpo.com for more information about that. But we are looking forward to seeing everybody in Long Beach in September. And with that, I will say thanks everybody for spending time with IANA, the connecting force behind the